The coronavirus has touched every corner of the world, from the US to Europe to Asia. Infections and deaths are skyrocketing. Hospitals and health workers overwhelmed. Lockdowns and restrictions imposed in many countries. Millions of people have lost their jobs. Many are worried about where their next meals are coming from and are reliant on government help.
I lost my job, so my family can't eat when they want to, and I can't even buy my daughter milk or diapers because I have no work.
The schooling of millions around the world has been disrupted. According to UNICEF, at the height of nationwide lockdowns in April, about 91% of the world's students in more than 194 countries were out of school. The pandemic has taken a heavy toll on many people's psychological state. Experts warn that numbers suffering from stress and depression are being greatly increased by a lack of social contact. With vaccines being rolled out in different parts of the globe, many people are hoping their lives will return to something more approaching normality. But how quickly that can happen may only become clear over the course of 2021. The wave of locust swarms is threatening widespread destruction across a number of African and South Asian countries. The desert locust is considered the most destructive migratory pest in the world, and a single swarm covering 1 square kilometer can contain up to 80 million locusts. The insects have destroyed crops and made people reliant on food aid.
It has caused a problem to our farm. We couldn't produce the number of bags of barley that we used to harvest from the field.
East Africa has been battling its worst locust invasion in decades. Humanitarian organizations say an estimated tenth of the world's population could be affected. Governments and international organizations are battling the insect swarms. Farmers have been trained to use motorized sprayers. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization says more than 3.2 million acres of locust infestations have been treated since January. In Asia, the insect swarms usually move into desert areas for breeding at the start of the monsoon season. India experienced one of its worst insect invasions in nearly 3 decades. The government launched Operation Locust Control, spraying insecticides over vast areas. Starting in early November, armed conflict broke out in Ethiopia's Tigray region as federal forces launched a major military operation against regional troops. Thousands of refugees have fled the violence into Sudan.
We were afraid of Sudan because we were here before, in this camp, and our government took us back. But now they started fighting and we are back here again. I've been under the tent here for more than 10 years.
The camp sits just 80 kilometers from the Ethiopian border. Officials say it's where some 10,000 refugees have been relocated. Fears of a coronavirus outbreak in the camp are just one of the many problems facing humanitarian groups.
This is a big challenge. To be working in a refugee camp that is dense with people during a pandemic is indeed a very big challenge.
The UN Refugee Agency says 50,000 refugees have fled into camps in Sudan, while over 100,000 people have been displaced within Ethiopia. The United Nations announced a $35 million emergency aid package to help both the refugees and those internally displaced. In Ethiopia, $25 million will go toward the purchase of medicine and medical gear, as well as drinking water. Another $10 million is being dispersed to these refugees in Sudan. The bitter fighting in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region between Armenia and Azerbaijan ended in November. But anger and divisions remain. Residents who had fled the fighting are slowly returning home. The small village of Kwamort has seen its share of the recent conflict. When full-scale war erupted, most of the villagers took refuge outside of the region, while the men stayed back to protect their homes. Now, the families are returning but are concerned about their prospects.
To be honest, I think there is no future here. But this is our homeland, and we had no other place to go. The Azerbaijanis are only 1 kilometer away, and my children are also afraid to stay here.
Under the Moscow brokered truce, Kwamort remain a part of the ethnic Armenian-controlled Nagorno-Karabakh region. But the division along the village's borders left dozens of hectares of pomegranate orchards on the Azeri side. The Kwamort farmers have no access to the fruits that are ripe for harvest. They can only tend what's being grown in a few small greenhouses as they struggle to return to a normal life. In Nagorno-Karabakh's capital, Stepanakert, people have returned to the streets as the shelling and explosions stopped. And they too will gradually set about trying to rebuild their lives. Beirut is grappling with the aftermath of a devastating blast in August that killed over 200 people. Buildings were destroyed. Thousands were left homeless. Officials believe the blast was caused by about 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate that were being kept at the port. The chemicals had been seized from a ship several years ago and were stored without any safety measures. The blast caused $8 billion in damage and economic losses. International support was quickly mobilized to help with the relief operation. Turkey flew in humanitarian aid, as well as doctors and search and rescue teams. Supplies included personal protective equipment and medical kits. Russia deployed 150 personnel to Lebanon to build a field hospital for the injured. The European Union, the World Bank, and the UN have launched a reform, recovery, and reconstruction framework, which they hope will address some of the country's systemic issues. Spanning the emergency response to the explosion in the medium term, the network is aimed at helping the shattered capital to rebuild and Lebanon to get back on its feet again.